I'm Erik Quigley. I'm a creative director out of Sarasota, Florida. I own an agency called Uncommon Crowd, and we're here with Ryan Marquardt of Ryan's Astrology. So he is I'm just going to put you in the designer, creative turned astrologer, which is why we connected in the first place. Because I was like, oh my God, somebody that knows what we're going through, but now has gone into astrology, and I use astrology in my business all the time. So let's talk. But we're going to be talking about using astrology in business because I use it in my creative business all the time. At a super low level, he gets far more in depth with it than I do, but we're going to talk about how you can use it in your business. Ryan, I don't know if you want to give yourself another little intro, unless I just took that from you, but.
Oh, no, you killed it. I'm Ryan Marquardt. I'm an astrologer, used to be a creative. So I'm very much like from Erik's world, but not in it anymore. But I still very much appreciate it. And
Yes.
the struggles deal with.
Yeah. Yes. No, you're aware, like you get it. So we're going to talk about, like I said, we're going to talk about astrology in business. There's three major ways that I use it in my business. And actually, let's just spin off of what is just come to a close and is still raking me over the coals, because I feel like she just took her shadow week and said, no, we're going to give it to you all now. But we just finished up a Mercury retrograde. If nobody's familiar with that or people aren't familiar with that, do not do anything in a retrograde. In my opinion, don't do anything business-wise, tech-related launches, things like that. I always try and steer clear of those, just because I have had too many times where I've had to restart things, redo things. My original business, I had to reformulate. I had to redo my LLC because I started initially in a retrograde. Ryan, do you want to? I know it was awful. You want to give your input on just retrogrades and business in general?
Yeah, like the most common thing I think is Mercury retrograde, for sure. You want to be careful to not sign contracts, launch a business, enter any sort of agreement, launch a product, a campaign of any kind. It's good to edit stuff. Like, retrogrades are not bad. It's great to rework things, but you don't want to launch anything new. And I think like the one that like is pertinent that's coming up this year is the Venus retrograde, because that's another one that's, it's not as common as Mercury retrograde, but it's a biggie and really can more so impact like your finances and your dealings with other people, versus like communication or tech malfunctions or like logistical issues. That's more of a Mercury thing. But Venus retrograde can really put you in a hole if you're trying to pull big moves during that. So that'll be.
Did not even know about that. So there's
a
good tidbit for you to watch out for. It's just, I thought we were good on just Mercury retrogrades, but never mind. They're all over the place. And if we could actually, you want to explain, because I do a horrible job of this. Somebody asked me the other day and I was like, I don't know that much. I just know that it just doesn't work for me. But can you explain what a retrograde is, what's physically happening? Because it's a little bit of a mind twist.
Yeah. It's just an optical illusion. So it looks like the planet is moving backwards. Like you'll see it come to this stopping point and then it like basically turns around and moves backwards. It's not really moving backwards. It's just like a weird phenomenon with the orbits of the planets. Like the best way I can liken it is, when you're on a treadmill and you're like on it for a while and then you get off and the room feels strange and you're walking, but like things are like looking like weird. Like it's just, it's that same thing where you're just like, something's off right now with a bit of myself in the room.
That's a really good way to think about it. Okay, great. Then okay. So now I know how to explain it the next time that somebody asks me, what is that? Because it's always the people that aren't into astrology at all. And they're like, yeah, what's that? And then I'm like, Mercury retrograde. And they're like, what's actually happening? And when I have to go, I don't know, I just follow it. They're like, oh yeah, whatever then. That'll give me something to pull out the next time. The other thing that I always do, and this is piggybacking off of that, is just transits and aspects in general of what's happening, like bigger planetary movements or new moons, full moons, those kind of like big, like heavy hitters. New moons, good for starting things. Full moons, good for closing things. Just those like basics. But if you can expound on kind of how that works and just what transits, aspects, how the moon works, all those things in relation to business would be good.
Oh, totally. Basically, as the moon grows in light, anything you set forward has momentum behind it. It's always best to try and launch business or a product or get anything going really right after the new moon. When there's a new moon, the moon looks dark, right? Which means there's no energy actually happening. So you usually want to wait a couple days when there's a little sliver of light on the moon and it's really starting to grow. then you just have this huge momentum. After the full moon, the moon's fading in light, which is really cool in business, but more so like it's a reflective state. It's where you want to have a team reassessment, look at the performance of any project that maybe you put out the door during the new moon phase, refine things or teach. Yeah, it's a good teaching phase as well, I guess. Education related content. If you're trying to just educate people on your business, that's good too.
Okay. Actually, that just makes me think about this because if we look at this from a non-believer perspective, if we can talk just the actual like implications of using astrology in your business and like how viable that is, like how I'm sure you've seen plenty of business people. I used to work with an astrologer that worked with a lot of people on Wall Street and things like that. And like what the viability of actually using astrology in your business is, or how you see it. Is that a question or a thought?
No, yeah, it's a hard thing, but it's funny because like a lot of people use it or really believe in it. I would say like probably the biggest market that I see it used in is financial market. A lot of like stockbrokers will especially use the moon for that stuff. But I think it's hard. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like the new moon, full moon, like phase is very much tied to markets. But then there's also
Is that like a buying, selling kind of thing then?
yeah.
Really?
Like, yep. And it works as well with like just a company kind of profit losses as well. I don't want to get too technical, but yeah, there are specific points where it's been studied and there are going to, you can expect, even if it varies depending on your situation, your company situation. Say you're doing well, there are certain things the moon will do that pretty much indicate, all right, now it's going to flip the opposite direction. And you're probably going to have a really bad couple days coming up here. If you're doing poorly at that same time, it can flip in your favor. It's something called perigee and apogee with the moon, where it's as close to the Earth as possible versus as far away from the Earth as possible, while also in the new moon, full moon cycle.
Oh, wow.
It's weird.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's the one thing with astrology that I continue to learn is that there's so many nuances and so many like intricacies to it that like you can't just I think most people's experience with astrology is their sun sign, right? I'm Sagittarius or just
Gemini.
I was gonna say you're Gemini, yeah. But that's the heavy hitter that people are always like, that's my sun sign, whatever. And they're not only I only hit a few little things that really means, and it's in looking at the holistic nature of your chart and these things like apogee and epigee, is that what you just of the moon in relation to perigee, whatever, in relation to full moon, new moon, like that whole thing, like the intricacies that come along with it are really where you start to see the bigger benefits, at least to me. You can't just label it with these one-offs.
Totally. Yeah. It's not really a one size fits all. Feel out the rhythm of your own business with what's going on. And then it gets really specific and predictions can get really accurate once you understand how it's showing up for you.
Yeah. That makes sense. The other thing that I tend to do, and just coming even just back off sun signs, right? Like I generally use those in my buyer personas where I'll say, here's a really specific way to boil down who somebody is, which is probably, it's stereotyping is really what it is, but that's what we're doing anyways with buyer personas. So I'll put in there like they're a Pisces or whatever it is, and just gives this kind of overarching thing. So that's anybody that's listening, especially if you're in branding, that's a thing that started to help me because people get it right away. And it's always fun. People love, I don't know, regardless of being into astrology, they love like the quote unquote mysticism of it, which isn't, I've said this before, it's like the mathematics of woo from like it's based on centuries of patterns. But I don't know, so is there anything else that you utilize or would recommend people utilize when it comes to using business astrology in business, or some things that, and even things that can really understand?
Yeah. I would say two really big things. One of which I know we've talked about. The other one I don't think we have talked about, but I'm like in. The one we've talked about is just the 10th house. That's the house of career, public image, status, reputation. Everybody knows what's going on in your 10th house. It's kind of like your brand out in the world. And so on your personal birth chart, but also your business's birth chart, because your business has a birth chart, which can vary. Like maybe it's the day you filed for the LLC, maybe it's when you got accepted, maybe it's the day you opened up shop, whatever. We can play with it. But like the 10th house is going to be huge. Like anything that's in there immediately becomes important for the reputation of in the business. And so what those planets are doing, or what planet rules your 10th house, what you want to pay attention to those planets at all times. But then also anything that's just moving through the 10th house in real time for you, it's a big deal. Like Jupiter just entered Taurus, which can totally expand your finances if that's happening in your 10th house. This could be like a record breaking year for you with like profits in a business if you have Taurus in your 10th. Yeah. So that's really, just the 10th house is just overarching huge longer term trends. And then I think the other thing is something, again, with the moon. It's called void of course moon. And oh my God, your business has a birth chart as well. Yeah, it does.
We'll go back to that. So hold on to that thought. Yes.
Yeah. We'll come back to that. I'm so happy you're here. I haven't seen you in so long. Oh my gosh, we need to catch up. There's something called void of course moon, which is so interesting. Basically, it's when the moon has made its last aspect with a planet before it changes signs. So it's, say the moon like came into a conjunction with Jupiter in Taurus, and then it won't make any other aspects with other planets before changing signs and moving into Gemini, which it changes signs every 2.5 days. So this is common. It's called void of course moon, meaning like it's an unaspected moon and it's going to change signs. That can last like a day. It can last a couple hours, but the void of course moon, you should not take meetings. It's basically, it's like a Mercury retrograde, but in these mini spurts that can happen every couple of days. But it's a very like ancient thing. A lot of astrologers, even to this day, will block off their calendar during a void of course moon, which is honestly not super logical, or it's not easy to do, because sometimes the void of course moon is going to take up an entire Monday. Yeah, it's like you might just be like, I can't work all day on Monday.
Yeah,
that's a privilege to be able to honor the void of course moon that way.
Yeah, exactly. So back to, and this is going to the business birth chart, right? When you're determining a business birthday, you said it could be a couple of different things. It could be the day you form your LLC. It could be the day you open up shop. It could be a multitude of things. How do you, or what's the best way of determining what that birthday is? Like, is it just so arbitrary that you're like, this is what I'm feeling in my soul? Or if it's like, this is like how...
Yeah, I know. It's weird, right? Because like astrology is perception. So it really is, what do you perceive the birth of your business to be? Like, where do you feel like that actually launched into the world? It's easier with a brick and mortar shop. Typically, you're going to say doors opened at this day. A lot, I would say, when it's not brick and mortar, most people will go off of the day they were approved with their LLC. They got that email. They've got the specific day and time. It's super accurate then. Like for me, with my astrology business, I did it the second I set my like website live, where people could literally submit payment through my website. I was like, I'd been practicing before then, but once I became like really official, I was like, this is it. And then I timed it out, and that's what I use now.
I think that's generally what I do, is that because I've got my LLC situated, but at least with brands and things like that, clients that I'm working with, usually I'm very honed in on the launch of the site. Like when you're putting the flag in the ground and going, hey, I'm here and the world can now see you, when it's out of like ideation phase, that's generally when I'm choosing it. But it is interesting that it's total perception. It's going, okay, how do I feel? It is how I feel about it.
Yeah. Some people will do it when it's like they've concepted the idea at home with a business partner, and they're like, we had this idea this night, and that's when it was born for them. It wasn't official.
Interesting. So it's really whatever becomes strongest and makes the most sense for you. Rule of thumb, I'm going to give a rule of thumb here. I'm going to go, if we're talking about business, 3 indicators would be LLC formation approval, brick and mortar, like ribbon cutting, and website launch.
Yeah, like,
three big things.
For an online, Yep.
I don't know if you have any questions on yours. Do you have any questions on yours?
No, I just got people like saying nice things. You must be Pisces. I'm not Pisces. You must be Pisces. Business has a birth chart. Yes. Thank you. Still here. No questions.
Okay. I do have a question from somebody, Crystal C829 on my end. about what we would tell a beginner. So I want to take it, I guess, from, I don't know if we want to talk about this as astrology in general, or if we want to take this from the beginner perspective in business. Maybe lead you to that.
If you're talking astrology in general, I would say, I have a books playlist on my TikTok that you can go check out. I literally tried to say what I think are good fundamental books. My personal favorite is The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. He's an evolutionary astrologer. I don't practice evolutionary astrology anymore. I use some of it, but that book puts astrology into this perspective that's blew my mind. And you want to read it front to back. Like, a lot of people will read this is universal rule. A lot of people want to read a beginner's astrology book by like just jumping straight to their placements, right? I'm going to read my sun sign or whatever. Don't do it, especially if you're doing the inner sky. But a lot of kind of show you how the signs build on top of each other. Like, they follow like a developmental cycle. So you really learn about the entirety of astrology by going through the whole story of the zodiac. So I think follow it in order is important. For business, I would say really I think you nailed it at the start, honestly. The big things are like new moon, full moon, like just to keep it simple for a beginner, like just to start experimenting. New moon is when you want to like hustle, put things out the door, launch the business while the moon's growing in light. After the full moon, when it's decreasing in light, you want to reassess, just more so almost repeat things that were already put out, like you're like drilling in on your messaging or like following up with people or educating on the business or the brand. And then I think really like playing with that, knowing, okay, Mercury's retrograde, these dates, it happens 3 to 4 times a year. It's like retrograde a quarter of the year, which is significant.
It is significant.
Yeah. And that's a quarter of the year where it's basically saying, do not do anything important. Like, really schedule around those times. Like, you will notice the difference. Those are 2 very simple things. And then this year we've got the Venus retrograde, which really is like on par with the Mercury retrograde. It just doesn't happen as often.
Yeah, and I would say that one of my biggest things with astrology, and even slipping into the belief of it, if that's something that people are struggling with, is, like you said, experimenting and paying attention in retrospect and going, oh yeah, this happened and it's happening again, like paying attention. It took me several times to really take Mercury retrograde seriously. Like, it took a while. And because I worked for an astrologer, and they were very, no, don't do this and don't do this. And you got to double check and everything and triple check everything. And we're not doing any tech, And I was, whoa, you need to like just get a grip and hold your horses. And then all of the things started happening. And I was like, okay, maybe you're not insane. Yeah. So experimenting with it is huge.
I think so too. And I would like, when you're experimenting, I would also say try to start small. Don't experiment with something that's like a fundamental aspect of your business or your just personal life either. Like, experiment with it in like fun ways. Like, one like funny way, I heard an astrologer, oh God, Chris Brennan, I think, said this, where he was like, during Mercury retrograde, order like Uber Eats or something, and you'll see it shows up late, or the order's wrong or something, or like the day is retrograde or whatever. Like little things like that where it's not that big of a deal. Just don't want to see. Yeah, because that's how you're going to notice the patterning of it and like how it truly will show up for you. And it really does change for everybody. I was born in a Mercury retrograde. 1 in 4 people are. It's common. It's not uncommon. I know, but it's terrible. But so Mercury retrograde it's like, I feel very smooth, actually. It's funny because I'll notice a lot of other people around me like having their little like time with Mercury retrograde, but it usually treats me very well because it's what I was born in. So it's my normal type of energy. I experience Mercury retrograde more in the shadow periods, which is like before and after, which I want to get into that. But most potently, like the day it like stations retrograde or comes out of retrograde. Those 2 days, Mercury's just stopped in the sky. That's good for nobody. Like, Mercury is travel, transportation as well, which it doesn't show up like that for a lot of people, I don't feel like. It just has a lifelong theme, but it does for me. I have had multiple car accidents the day Mercury went retrograde, put my battery fail on me, like crazy, weird things have happened. I literally do not take any mode of transportation. I've had a scooter accident on the day Mercury went retrograde. A scooter.
That's insane.
Like, nuts. So I just don't do it anymore.
And again, it's like over this, it's like the pattern. It's over time that
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I should probably not, like, because this happens every time. And that's the big thing I've learned over time. But like I said, that's why Mercury retrograde is my big thing. Every time I've had a client cancel, every time I've had launch issues, every time a project needs changed in a big way, it's always because it's been like incepted during that period. So right now, like because we were in retrograde, I had a bunch of conversations. I told everybody, let's table this until the 30th. So we're well out of shadow, out of everything. I'll reach back out after then. I have several people, but I'm like, I'm not signing a proposal. We're not getting any deposits. We're not doing any of that until we hit, because I don't have the time, honestly, to redo anything or the
That's
energy.
exactly it. Because like
Yeah.
I often see, I'm like getting your chart pulled back up because I'm like, were you on Mercury retrograde? I can't remember. But
No, I was not. Thank God.
okay.
Because mine would be a
Yeah, you're like, you definitely, I feel, are like experiencing like real Mercury retrograde stuff. I think like a lot of times nothing goes wrong, right? A meeting will happen and it's okay, fine, whatever. But like something will go wrong later and it has to be
Yes.
redone, right?
Yes.
It's like a little thing and it could just be annoying to deal with.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
everything's gone. It can be so annoying.
Or things will get drug out. Like it'll just take
Yeah.
much, like it affects it, like compounds it later. Where it's okay in the immediate situation, totally fine, whatever. We might have some tech glitches, whatever. And then as it goes, it's 3 months later and you're like, why is this still going on? Or why do we have to do this? Or it was just weird things you don't ever anticipate. If anybody gets anything out of this, Mercury retrograde is not your friend when it comes to this. I don't care who tells you what, just don't do it. But actually, I want to talk about, so before we get into some readings, Ryan and I are working on something together. So we are working on a calendar that you'll be able to subscribe to for astrology and business. So you can bolt this calendar onto your regular old Google Calendar that will show you when retrograde is, when Venus retrograde is coming out. That whole thing is going on. Just any really significant aspects, new moon, full moon, like all of these things that really would be associated with your business. So you have the ability to go, okay, this is the best time for me to do this. This is the best time for me to take a work vacation, whatever it happens to be. So we are working on that. I will have a link posted on my bio. Ryan will have one probably on his bio. We're going to start pushing this stuff out, but it is coming. So it's ready to go. There'll be a wait list that we're getting ready. People can sign up for. And I will have that on the replay of this on YouTube. And then I also go following this. We'll have it up on my links on TikTok and on Instagram. But you'll start to see more about that. We're excited about it. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
Just so excited about it. I'm like really planning out the transits. I'm putting in void of course moons, to be honest. So going all in.
I'm excited.